Good morning, cellists. Here we are in week 6 of the lockdown, and we're on to the last of the movements in the first suite, and it is the 6th movement. As you're aware, if you've been following in the sequence in which I've been delivering the movements, we haven't gone about them from movement 1 through to 6. We started in the middle, we worked backwards towards the beginning. The prelude was a big movement to cover last week. And finally now we're at the jig, which is lovely and uplifting. It's a dance movement. Well, they're all dance movements of one type or another. This one's definitely one that you feel you want to kick off your shoes and dance. However, it will have its surprises in it, not all so as one might expect in a dance. Now, in terms of warm-ups, I think you should prepare by looking at the D minor scale, a harmonic minor, and the reason is that when we come to look at this jig, it's quite unusual in that Bach will be actually modulating to the dominant minor, and it's quite rare. He does touch on that in the second minuet, but other than that he doesn't actually do this. So I think we should get our minds into that sort of set. Here we have it then, and watch my bowing for this. What I'm going to suggest is you not only just do a long tonic version, but I'd like you to experiment with going to the end of the bow on the long tonic, staying there, and then coming back and staying there. I'll show you what I mean. And this is actually about bow control, bow management, and it has a relationship to what we'll be looking at a bit later. Obviously from here you could continue, even to the very top if you feel like it. You know, you can get in 4 octaves reasonably comfortably at this starting note of the D. It might not be a bad idea to get those couple of octaves up here, because obviously the suite is so concentrated in the lower positions, you might have neglected your higher register. So do feel free to add those in. Now, the next part of our technical digest is going to be a couple of arpeggios. They're ones we've met before, and I just want you to review D minor and D major. And I'm saying them that way round. As you'll probably be aware, and in your own cellist's development and path that you'll have taken, we quite commonly start with the majors and then move to minor, and you know that's how things are presented to us as we learn, particularly if you go through the exam system. But don't do it that way around. Do the minor and then the major for a change of outlook. So we have here then major, and it is actually quite refreshing to just do them that way round, minor to major. And this is going to bear, I guess, what, a direct relationship to the jig, where when I mentioned earlier that Bach modulates to the dominant minor, he then cheekily switches over and suddenly becomes dominant major. So if you do your D minor, D major, you'll be already in the mindset for that, and you should be able to spot it. And when we spot these things in music, I think it helps you to really interpret it and enjoy the composer's ideas, you know, coming to life, and really realising why it's fun, or why it makes you smile, or think he's been a bit cheeky. Right, so there's your technical digest with regard to the left hand warm-ups and patterns. Now for a bow exercise, I'd like you to try something very simple. We're just going to be using the open G and D strings, which are of course our primary notes in the whole suite, being the tonic, G, and the dominant, D. And whilst I'm momentarily referring to those 2 strings, I just might also mention to you A, which is the dominant of the dominant, because we're all in fifths. There was just one piece of the jigsaw I just didn't explicitly describe last week when we looked at the prelude, and that is in that last quarter that we looked at, the oscillating A's are of course an A pedal, which is the dominant of the dominant, And then when you come to the chromatic line, you had the oscillating Ds, and that's the dominant pedal, and it finally resolves to G. Anyway, today's bow exercise, very simple. We're going to be looking at what is often termed as Z bowing. So if I just show you a stroke, which is, if you imagine we've got a whole down bow that's going to come. Instead, we have a little hiccup in the middle, down, and when you get to the centre, do a small up bow, and then continue to the full length of the down. The same can happen on the up bow. So go up bow halfway, back a small length of the bow on a down, and then fulfill the full up bow back to the heel. And you can see in this shape that we kind of create a Z shape. The feel of it is like the Z, and hence the description of Z bowing. Let's just do that on an open string. So here you have a G, up bow, down, and I've arrived at the point, and then same on the way up. Up, short down, up. And also try this out on D. And then try a combination. You could even go up and back down. So there's a few patterns to play with, and it's really about being comfortable about this shape with a little tiny hiccup in the middle, and then continuing with the full length of the bow. This will be about bow management issues that we'll come across in the jig, and also in today's or this week's study. I was thinking about what to choose, and I've selected Feuillard number 22. And the reasons are the same meter as the jig, which is 6/8, which is quite a typical dance meter, particularly in folk music. And also the key of number 22 is D major, and that's our dominant to the suite key. So I think it fits the bill quite nicely. And we're going to look at the first 8 bars today, and we're going to be using the Z bowing in this study. So it begins like this: half a bow, then at the halfway point a little up bow, then the rest of the up bow. Now the difference between that bow stroke and the one I've just shown you with regard to open strings was that this time the little up bow in the middle isn't on the string, it's a staccato lift. And just rewinding the exercise I gave you, you could do a new version of that and put in staccato. I'll just show you that before we proceed with the study. So you can hear a little pinch on that middle tiny little bow. So here we have the study again: a down, pinch, full length down, then halfway back, pinch, the rest of the bow. Now we're going to cross to the lower 2 string now, and finishing off. So a lot of combination across the 3 strings there of the Z bow shape. You'll also might have noticed in the middle there a little bit of a D major arpeggio. So that's going to stand you in good stead for the Feuillard and the Bach. Continuing with the study, we have this. Now as you've crossed, and I'm in second position now, you've crossed over, don't forget nice flat bow hair at the point. And when we've moved to the A string at this full length, your right arm will be fully extended, you know, very little in the way of a bend on the elbow there, to get to the top there, and back again. Crossing the string again here with rotation, a little rock. Then crossing to the C string in a moment. By the time we get to the bottom, you can notice my elbow on the right is dropped and my elbow on the left is risen, so that I've rotated to be ready and strong over the little finger on the F sharp here. And I have a nice low arm here, which gives good weight, good sound production. Also ensures that you've got a nice perpendicular angle for the bow to the string. It's a lovely little study. We've actually modulated to F sharp minor. It's beautiful. So just having a look, there was one other little technical thing in there, and that is in bar 7 we had finger substitution. I've got a third finger on G sharp, swap over to a little finger. When you do that, just make sure that you take the whole hand shape back. Don't try and squish things around like this. Just go back to the full whole hand. So that so far in these 8 bars we have this then. And in actual fact, that way round, starting on a down, is quite uncomfortable. And if you look at it in terms of the shapes, the oral architecture, if this was in a piece of music, you would, I think, select to start on an up bow because it feels more natural for the rise and fall. So let's just try it and see. So if we begin up bow, it really does fit beautifully that way round. And I think in terms of a musical shaping, that's what I would do. I would start up. However, it's a study. And one of the reasons we undertake our studies is to push ourselves, of course. So if you actually do it starting down, it's going to be harder to get that shape, but take up the challenge. You know, that way you're going to be working hard and know how to create a sound that sounds like the natural way round. So this, as I began with an up, you know, it's very easy to arrive at that top D on a lovely down. But let's see if we can mimic it down up. So you're going to have to work much harder because I'm at the point for the arrival point. So there's a really lot of strength going on here in the forearm muscle. So, you know, initially just take it as it comes, but enjoy experimenting. Start it up, it'll be a lot more comfortable, much easier to get that shaping, and then go back to doing it down at the beginning. See if you can keep the shaping, and you'll probably find you have to work harder. As one more comment, you might have noticed that some of my little short notes in the middle were probably really not short enough. So you do better. Right, moving on, we're going to begin work on the jig. And it's obviously a much shorter movement than others we've been looking at. And I've decided for this first lesson that we can do the whole of the first section. It's just 12 bars. You know, it's a slightly odd number, as in not an odd number, but a strange number. You would expect 8 or 16. And here we are with 12. Now, at this opening, we've got a lift and an arrival. So let's be sure that we have that. So we'll be beginning somewhere around half or third of the bow. So there's this sense of you're on the string and then you lift off. And that gives it a kind of a bit of air, expectation of arrival, but not too clipped. We don't really want no pinching, but more of a saucer shape in the string. And the lift off the string will give it that little lift, literally a lift, and it sounds like a lift, a little bit of air. And arrive, don't be afraid to arrive on the G. So that there's always this sense of lift and arrive, lift and arrive. You can sort of hear this little tiny alternative life going on in there, if you like. And in terms of the printed bowing, we have these 3 slurs. But again, lift the bow off the string just after you've arrived on that third quaver. Be careful not to pinch it though. We don't want really. It's just not as gracious as a little bit more smooth and then lift. Notice I've moved on to the D string ready for. Now don't worry, in the second full bar there, don't worry, because we've got 2 ups, there's still no need to pull a false down. You don't need to do for the 2 ups, because actually you could do it all on a very tiny amount of bow hair. You hardly need any bow hair at all, so don't be tempted to pull hard on that, because if you do, I think it could become a little too heavy, and that might be a bit ugly. Moving on to the second half of this phrase, of this first sentence. Now, there's a bit of thinking required here. As you can see, the whole piece begins on an up bow, and that is the clue I want you to hold on to, because in this bar that I've just looked at, in bar 3, it's very tempting to see it as this. Where you've got a whole first beat and a whole second beat and then an arrival. But in actual fact, I think you have to look at the fact we've got all these little upbeats going on. So it's really that the last quaver of each of those groups belongs to the next beat. Ta-ta, ta-ta, ta-ta. And you can hear it really throughout this whole movement, really. So that if we took the kind of the secret life of these up and downs, we've got this. And I just think you need to kind of look at it in this alternative way to really understand where the lift and arrivals are really sitting. So let's just try this first 4 bars. And I think that really works. It lifts it, and you get this lift and arrival. It's really beautiful. Now the following answering phrase, similarly, we have up, down, in terms of the upbeat and arrive. So you can hear again up and down for arriving. Up, arrive, up, arrive. And in this phrase, I think you can more easily hear the 2 voices. Da dee da da dee da dee dee da da da. You know, there's definitely a very animated conversation going on here. Now I shall actually fill in the gaps, because we have got some more notes in here, of course. So that you can hear in that. I think someone had a lot more of the last word in the last part of that phrase. And in terms of the bow stroke matching this to bring out the voices, it's like I mentioned at the first bar, that wait until you've arrived into the note, into the 3rd quaver in a slur, and then lift. And that way we get a really pretty upbeat. And there's a little bit more of a lift in the 6th quaver. Sorry. So there's an articulation on the 6th one, a tiny lift and back on the string just before that 6th quaver. And that gives it animation, and really I think it helps the upper voice be the dominant voice in this, you know, the one that's going to win out, I suspect. And that takes us to a halfway point of this section where we've arrived. A major arpeggio there. Guess what? That's the dominant of the dominants, because we are getting very familiar with this, I hope, given that we're all tuned in fifths and we can really easily pick up on that. And of course we're expecting it to arrive here, which it does, but this is the joyous moment of surprise. Instead of being a major, D major, we would expect, you know, something very major, you're expecting something, but no. He's gone to D minor straight away. That's absolutely beautiful, and we need to do something with this. So you could just play it through in a similar fashion, and you could have a lift. something different would be good. One, a dynamic. Let's go down dynamic. And notice this time the dominant major F sharp makes an appearance just at the end here there. And as you know, at the beginning of this class, I was saying do D minor, D major arpeggios in succession, and that will help you be really clear what's happening at this moment. I might suggest to you that although we could take the stroke that we've used before, where I'm just showing you that in the third of those quavers we arrive into it smoothly and lift off, but you could equally, I think convincingly, be legato. And wow, wouldn't that give you a magic contrast? Let's just try it. So the first one, lift, I think still, or maybe not. Let's just try not. And I think there's something about the ending, it really has the feel of, oh yeah, why don't we just like crescendo into a dominant major. Thrilling. So let's just try this whole section with some of those ideas interweaved, and I think I'll probably try out the legato version of that D minor section, but we'll see. Okay. Oh, isn't it fun? I hope you enjoy it.